Hello, I am Rosanna Wagway. I am the founder of IgniteHER, a boutique coaching firm which helps women to balance productivity and self-care so that they can experience harmony, right? Why hustle, struggle, and grind when you can engage in harmony, strategy, and grace? So I'm super excited today because I'm going to be interviewing a woman, Latoya Washington, for another Ignite Her series. This YouTube channel is designed to talk to women on fire who are really making a difference in their industry and really helping people to lead more productive lives. We are going to be talking about communication. And I'm not sure most of you know this, but I mastered in corporate communications. I did my bachelor's and my master's in corporate communications, and it was just so fascinating to talk about communication differences in gender, corporate communication, differences in the way that we speak, differences in the way that we exhibit behavior or we interpret behavior, right? What could be this for me meaning cold, for someone else could be like, oh, she's mad, right? So I'm going to bring on my guest, Latoya Washington, so that we can talk a little bit more about why people are unable to engage in productive conversations, but more importantly, what we can do about it. All right, are you ready? I hope you're just as excited as I am to get all the gems about how to become a better communicator.
Yes.
Okay, I am so excited to have Latoya Washington join us today. Latoya, thank you so much for being here. I feel like I'm so blessed to have these conversations because you and I haven't even met in person. We've encountered each other on probably 2 or 3 occasions. And whenever I meet someone who I think is really dope and I want to spend more time with them, I'm like, I need to interview them and I need to record this because other people are going to benefit from these conversations. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Rose. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So tell us, Latoya, who are you? Introduce yourself to us.
Well, Latoya is a very simple, loving, kind person. I was always the type of person, I still am. If I see someone kind of on the outskirts and they're sitting by themselves, I'm the type of person that will go up to them just to have a conversation and get to know who they are. I love to travel. I love to write. I am a poet and a songwriter at heart. That's in my time of, it's very therapeutic. So when I'm going through something, I start to write, definitely pray. I am a worshiper. In my hardest moments, I go to God in prayer and praise. And I am a leader, meaning I want to see people grow. You know, I know we have our challenges, but I like to encourage people and uplift people and motivate people and make people laugh. I love to make people laugh and just see that beautiful smile on their face and beautiful smile on Rose's face as well. I love to see that, you know, because I know that sometimes we go through challenges and we just need that little push, that little fire to get us keep going. So that's who I am. That's who Latoya is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And what I love is the reason I ask people to come on and share who they are without starting with their titles is because there's some things that you said that I never knew and I'd probably never know based on reading your bio, right? Like I didn't know that you're a poet. I didn't know that you're a worshiper at heart, but all these things are part of what makes you who you are. The other reason I ask people not to start off with their titles is because a lot of times we get lost in our roles and our titles and we forget that there was a whole person before we got in any of these roles, right? So I'm a productivity coach, but that journey started when I was in my 20s. Who was I for the first 25, 26 years before I became a coach? Who was I before I became a mom of 2? Who was I before I became a wife? So I think it's so important for us to just be able to talk about who we are, what we enjoy, what we love, and why we're dope outside of our titles, outside of our roles. So thank you for doing that so gracefully.
Oh, yeah. And I was going to say that sometimes we lose our identity when we're no longer operating in those roles. And so I went through that. Praise God for getting through that. But so I appreciate that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are you? How are you doing? Check in
I
with you.
Well, I am doing good. I am in a process of my life where I feel like, me and my husband are transitioning. I was once working in human service field and women's shelters and human trafficking. So I went through a transition. I was kind of burning out and I was
Mm,
starting to feel like it was just overwhelming. But God's like, sit still. And so I'm in that
yeah.
sit still where I'm a type of person where I don't want to sit still. So this is God's like, you gotta sit still. And so it's a little challenging.
Mhm.
But that's where I'm at right now. So I thank you for asking that question because sometimes we don't ask, how are you doing? We
Right.
just keep moving. So thank you for that question.
You're welcome. And that might be a part of communication. I
Yeah.
remember, so I grew up in Jamaica, and you always have a conversation with someone, whether or not you know them. You see someone, you say good morning, you say hi, how are you doing? And you have a little chit chat, and that's normal. I remember
Mhm.
when I moved to New York, I would see people in the train or in the elevator like, hi, good morning. And they'd kind of look at me like, okay, crazy, don't come over here. And I'm like, okay, clearly this is a different culture. And New York is a different beast altogether. This is not an
Yeah.
American thing. This is New York, right? And I realized that communication was different based on where you were. So I appreciate you sharing what you're going through. And I'm wondering how many people don't say, how are you? Because they know either answer is going to be, I'm fine. And then they move on, right? It's like you
Uh-huh.
say, how are you? And someone's like, oh, I'm not too good. I'm like, okay, great. Nice seeing you.
Mhm.
We're on autopilot and we're so used to the
Mhm.
generic response that sometimes we don't even pause to listen. And I know you'll get us all set with the listening
Yeah,
skills,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's so true. And I tell people you better be careful when you ask how are you, because you're speeding past, you're going 90 miles an hour, and someone says, I had a really bad day. And I'm the type of person I'm like, I hit the brakes, I back up. I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, let me take myself out of the equation. I hear that somebody needs to talk. So
Absolutely.
that is so true.
Yeah. And it looks like we're leading parallel lives, which again, I didn't know that you were going through a transition. I guess I'm still transitioning, but I just quit my job in June. I worked
Hmm.
in human resources, not human
Oh,
services, but I worked in human resources for 10 years. And I left in June, one of the 4.3 million people who have been leaving their jobs during this pandemic, right?
right.
Um, and I was definitely before the point of burnout. I haven't gotten to burnout, but I also knew that there was a stronger calling on my life. And I was at this job, which had become a part of complacency for me, right? It was stable. It was, you didn't have to require all this level of faith or exertion because you just did everything on autopilot. So I'm also transitioning into doing my coaching full time, and I'm really enjoying it, which is different for me because normally I don't like that uncomfortable process. So I guess there's some growth there.
Yeah, we're both growing because I'm like, Lord, you got to do something.
Yeah. So let's jump in. I want to hear all your gems, all your nuggets. So my company is really surrounded around productivity. I work with women who want to balance self care, but they also want to be productive. And for a lot of them, it's like those two sound mutually exclusive. Like, how can I be engaged in self-care but then also be productive? They think it's either one or the other, and I'm like, no, you put them together and then you create harmony, right? So I brought you on today to speak specifically about productive conversations.
Mhm.
How can you be more productive in your communication? So before we get into the steps of how to be better, what are some of the things that you think hinders our ability to communicate effectively?
Oh, I think also it's the willingness. The first thing is the willingness to say that I'm struggling. I don't know how to communicate. We might think a lot of talking is communicating, or
Mm-hmm.
being loud is communicating. Silence communicates as well. So your silence is talking very loudly to me sometimes. And also, you mentioned one culture, our different backgrounds, our childhood upbringing, um, abusive relationships, childhood abusive relationships in whatever capacity, mental, physical, sexual, trust issues.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be honest. To me, that's a big one for me because if I don't feel as though you're trustworthy, I'm only going to tell you what I don't mind you sharing with someone else.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
mind you sharing that I'm having a bad day. But telling you why I'm having a bad day,
Mhm.
I don't trust you with that. So sometimes people feel, oh, she doesn't open up fully to me, or he doesn't open up fully to me. It could be he or she doesn't feel as though you're trustworthy
Mhm.
with their story or trustworthy with their humanity, And if I share my humanity and you talk about it with somebody else, that's going to break down that communication. Okay. Misunderstood too. Some people don't know how to get the words out. They may not be as fluent in a particular language
Mhm.
or their educational background. They might just feel as though, I can't articulate that well, so I'm just not going to say anything. So
Mhm.
there's so many different hindrances that I've seen over the years and just through personal experience and as well as through research. What was another one too? Assumptions.
Mhm.
People assume things about you. I was like, you know what? You're assuming that's what I'm saying. You're assuming that I'm giving off this vibe or this energy that I don't want to talk to you when really, I'm just having a bad day.
Right. Like it's
you
not even
know,
about you.
it's not about you at all. And I will also say, I think you mentioned one of these and I wrote it down because I was like, wow, that's so deep. But you talked about past failures and outcomes, how
Mhm.
your attempts to communicate with somebody kind of failed. So it's like, why should I talk to you again? Or why should I bring that up to you again? I feel like it's going to end in the same result.
Mhm.
So that's one. Intimidation.
Okay.
Oh, intimidation. If I feel intimidated, I'm definitely not going to open up.
Mhm.
So that's a barrier as well. So those are some of the challenges that I see in regards to our productive conversations.
Yeah, those are some really good ones. Let's start with asking for help. So one of the things I coach my clients, I was going to say my women, one of the things I coach them about is asking for help, right? So a lot of times the reason we get burned out is because we have this big S on our chest and we want to be superwoman. And I say to them, like, and I shouldn't even say them, I'm speaking to myself too, because I'm one of those people who, I'm doing everything. And at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted. And then there's still things on my to-do list. And that's why I started doing this coaching because I saw them in me. So one of the things I'll talk about is asking for help. A lot of times we don't communicate that we need help, maybe because we don't know how to, or maybe because we don't even realize that we need help until we're on the brink of burnout. But even sometimes we may get a little bit of resentment, like, don't they see that I need help? And it's like, no, you're always like, I got it. So why would anyone even
Mhm.
offer assistance? They already assume that the answer is going to be, I got it. So what are some ways that we can be better communicators to ask for help? Because I'm also thinking that a part of it has to do with pride, right? Like maybe you don't want to ask for help, or maybe, like some of the things you said, like past failures. So I asked you the last time and you didn't help me. So like, what are some of the things that we can do to ask for help in a better way, or maybe some tips of how to ask for help? Maybe we just don't have the words, right?
Right. One thing that you said with pride is
Mhm.
some of us too are self-reliant.
Mm,
So you know what? I'm just gonna do this because Rose knows how to do this
yeah.
better than Latoya. Because Latoya's not gonna do it exactly like how Rose wants it, but yet Rose is tired. So it's like it's like, yeah, I know I can't do it exactly like you, Rose, but I see that my sister is tired. So allow me to come in and help you and assist you. Self-reliance, but I would say by acknowledging that you have a challenge.
There it
So
is.
I'll be honest. So I literally, this self-reliance thing is like I can definitely attest to that. And I had to say to my husband, I am so used to doing everything by myself, but please understand that I'm trying. So I had to acknowledge
Yeah.
that this was a challenge. And even though I do not know how to just kind of fall back, I'm at least willing to acknowledge it and I'll take
Mhm.
the steps to do what I need to do. So if that means, okay, hubby wants to cook dinner one day instead of me always cooking dinner, I'm not going to go in the kitchen and stand over him and say, you know
Right.
what, maybe you you should put this paprika in here and all this other stuff and make it taste like this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit in the living room while you cook. These
Right.
are just small things that help me because I had to admit, listen, I'm struggling in this area. I
Mm.
have a challenge to communicate. One thing I would do with my communication, my husband would always say, you shut down. And I'm
Mm.
big on body language.
Yeah.
If you show me that you are like not hearing me, you're ignoring me, all of this is shutting down. And I'm just going to sit there quietly. And he's like, no, I'm just taking in what you're saying. I'm
Yeah.
processing. And again, men communicate differently than us.
Okay.
But I just had to acknowledge it. Okay, you know what? When I see your facial expression, I shut down in my
Mm.
communication. And let me make an effort. That's the other thing. We have to make an effort to improve in that area that we're lacking.
Yeah.
You know,
I
but
love
take
how
it.
yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, just make an attempt. You know, you may fail, but at least keep trying because you
Mhm.
want to improve in that area so you can maintain that relationship.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of vulnerability, right? So a lot of the reason we're not asking for help is because we don't want to communicate that vulnerability, right? So
Mhm.
when you say acknowledge it, first you have to be honest with yourself, like, I can't do this. I need help. I'm burnt out. I'm stressed. I'm tired, right? So it's one thing to first acknowledge it to yourself, but then now you have to go admit it to someone else. So I can
Yeah,
definitely see why people don't ask for help, but we also see on the flip side what the outcome is, right? We're communicating without saying, we're communicating non-verbally. I don't need you. We're communicating, I'm an island. I got this, right? So
right.
it's interesting that the thing that we want is a thing that we're not asking for, but we're getting the thing that we don't want, right? So we're not getting the support because we haven't asked for it. We're not getting the community because we're showing that we want the isolation, we want to do it for ourselves. So I think it's just so interesting how communication is layered. Because like you said, you're very sensitive to body language. I remember when I took your course, I'm like, Latoya, I have this blanket on because I'm cold. I'm not sitting back here like, what's she talking about? I had to acknowledge that because I understand that me leaning back here, or if you can't see my hands, or if I'm crossed over like this, you may be like, okay, so what's going on with Rose? Am I boring her? Is she not having a good day? So I think it's important to recognize these things so we can talk
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's so true.
Another
Um,
one, you go ahead.
and that vulnerability thing is very tough for many of us because I'm like, oh wow, that's a good one, Rose, because when we're vulnerable, we are totally exposed. There's no pride there because you're completely open when you're vulnerable. So you're open to everything, the
Yeah.
negative and the positive, and it can wound you. And I think that's why some people may be scared to open up in that way
Mhm.
because, oh my gosh, I'm completely open. So Rose can say and do anything to me because I'm completely open. I tell a lot of ladies, I said, don't make any decisions when you're vulnerable.
Mhm.
That's how you get into those relationships and you make these career choices and all these other things because you're vulnerable. So you're open to anything. Take your time, acknowledge where you're struggling, but don't make a rash decision that
Mhm.
can last you for the rest of your life. So
Ooh, yes, nuggets, gems. So since we're being vulnerable, let me get vulnerable. One of the things I know that I struggle with in my communication is I talk too fast, and sometimes that means I'm interrupting. Several
mm,
times on this call, I'd be like, "Well, hold up, I got something to say to my brain. Let me say it really quickly." So I interrupt people not because I don't value what they're saying, not because I want to do it intentionally. My timing is just off. Um, but that can communicate something negatively. It could communicate, okay, she's rushing me. It could communicate she's speaking over me because she doesn't think what I'm saying is important, or she thinks that what she's saying is more important than everyone else.
mhm.
So you've heard me like babble over you a couple of times, and it wasn't intentional. But can you share some tips for people like me who it's not malintent, but it happens? So that it's not the intention that matters so much; it's the outcome. Can you share tips for people like me who talk too
Yeah,
much?
well, no, I don't think you talk too much. I don't think you talk too much, but I definitely say to people who interrupt is that it's more like it might seem crazy, but keep a notepad or something near you, because what you're trying to do is you get this thought so quickly. Oh my gosh, yes. And it just comes out. And it's not like you're trying to be an interrupter because you don't want to talk about a particular subject or a topic, or I just don't want to hear what you have to say. That's not your intention. So me, I don't feel any type of way. This is open dialogue conversation. But when someone's talking about a sensitive subject, I try to tell people, write down that thought immediately, write it down. Just like, hold your peace, give yourself a second. When that thought comes, give yourself a second to pause and breathe and say, you know what? Let me hold that thought until they get done. But I say write it down, definitely, because it's meaningful. If that particular word or thought came to mind, it's needed for that conversation, but just not at that time. Pace yourself, pace yourself, take your time. And also too, I think you said your background is Jamaican. Okay, so I know a lot of Jamaicans and they talk pretty fast. And I think it's more like, once they get to know Rose, they know Rose is not trying to be intentional. Her motive is pure, and it's not going to be it's just like ill intent, like you said. It's just, I genuinely just have this thought. I'm excited about this thought. Oh wow, I didn't even think about that. Instead of just saying it out, just write it down real quick. I keep a notepad with me because as sometimes I am interrupted, especially if I'm so excited, thoughts are coming to me. I'm like, okay, Toya, calm down, breathe a little bit, breathe a little bit. This is about Rose. This is okay. All right. Let me focus on Rose, because I'm like, oh wow, all this stuff is dropping. I'll write it down. I already wrote down. Look, I didn't already wrote down like 4 or 5 things that you said. So I didn't interrupt you. So it's possible to, write those things down if you have a pad near you. I definitely say pace yourself, like breathe, just give yourself a second before before you say it, to allow that person to complete their thought. I'm still going to do more research on that interrupter, because I find that there's so many people who interrupt and they start to feel bad. And I realized, well, not everybody's interrupting with ill intent, or to ignore what you're saying. So I'm going to do more research on that, because it could be culture. It could be you just impulsive. Right. Like the thought comes to mind, bam, I'm just going to say it, but, it's just, I think there's more to it than that. But that's definitely the 2 things I would say, is to write it down, your thought, and pace yourself. Just breathe. Take a second before you respond or before you speak out.
You notice that pause?
Yeah. Good job.
I think those are very good suggestions, because like you said, it is excitement, it is passion. Because if I'm not interested, I'm just gonna be like, and you'll get the blank face, right? But because I'm interested and I'm passionate about it, I'm like, oh, and what about this? What you're saying is exciting me. So that's where the passion comes in. But to not be an angel, there's also something to be said about, if I'm simply listening, then I shouldn't have all these thoughts, because what's happening is I'm planning my response, right? So instead of sitting there like, okay, and I want to say this and I want to say that, there's something about, okay, let me just listen, because maybe that thing that I want to say so badly is what you're going to say next, if I actually give you a chance to say it, right? Yeah. Or maybe the question that I'm going to ask you to clarify, that's your next sentence. So definitely focus on listening too.
Yeah, that active listening, and you're right. If you already have a response, you're not really listening. We think we are, that's why the communication course, we take our time. All right, here's some videos to show you that really this person is not listening. They're already talking over. Rose was about to already say that, and I've interrupted her. She didn't even get her thought across, and so it's very important to take your time to truly actively listen, because it's not about you. It's about the other person at that time. Yeah.
I love that. One of the other hindrances you mentioned was assumptions. And I didn't realize that I was making assumptions. I thought I was being considerate. So I'll give you a real example. I have a girlfriend who bakes cakes, and we have a group chat. And at one point she was like, oh my gosh, I have so much going on, the baby, the husband, the job, the this, the this, the this. So what she's communicating is, I'm stressed, I'm tired. I wanted her to bake a cake, but instead of asking her to bake a cake, I said, my friend just communicated that she's stressed. Why would I give her another thing to put on her list when she just communicated she was stressed? So these are the thoughts that's going on in my head. And I hopped on a Zoom with the same people in the group chat. And I was saying to them once, like, help me figure this out. I said, I wanted her to bake a cake for me, but I thought the considerate thing to do was to not ask her to do it, considering what she had already communicated. And my friend said to me, another friend said, Ro, you're making assumptions. And I'm like, what? She said, you not only are you making assumptions about this person's bandwidth or their desire to do something, you're also making assumptions and not allowing them to make their own decision. So basically what she was saying is, I can say, hey, Latoya, I want you to bake this cake for me. Can you do it? And give you the opportunity to say yes or no. And she went on to say that in addition to you not giving her the opportunity to say yes or no, you may have taken away an opportunity for her, because maybe baking the cake would have been the outlet she needed to not feel stressed about all the other things that's going on. I'm like, well, golly, this is so complicated. This is layered. Because in my head, if I just told you that I'm stressed over 10 things, don't ask me to do nothing else. But then I'm assuming that I want to be treated, that she wants to be treated the way I want to be treated.
Right, right. And that assumption is so deep because this young lady has a talk show, and she was doing a segment on support. And sometimes I didn't realize the assumptions of my support to people. And so I was supporting people in a way that they didn't need support. And so I was like, oh, wow. So my way of supporting people is presence, being there. Even if I say nothing, I want you to know that I'm there for you. But that was an assumption that everybody's that same way. So some people's support needed is, hey, can you buy my book? Can you share? Can you, maybe mention my name or something? I was assuming a certain level of support. And we assume, and I would have felt the same way. I would have said, you know what? I'm gonna just let her sit out on this one. I'm just gonna get someone to make a cake, not realizing indeed making a cake is her therapeutic way to deal with the stress. And it's layers to it because everybody is different. And we can't assume everyone's the same, right? Or they do things or respond the same way we do. So I really like that assumption thing. There's another assumption that I went through, and I mean, I was so confused. So confused. I said, Lord, I don't know what's going on with me and this lady. So I had a client who was in the shelter and whatnot. And so one thing about me is just I used to live in a shelter. I was homeless at one point in my life. And so when I know that getting food and things like that was a little hard. So I had an opportunity to get all these different bags of food for the ladies at the shelter. And I was looking for her, and she wasn't in her room. So I was looking for her, and just so happened to leave for the end of the day. And I was like, hey, I was looking for you. I got you a bag of food and everything. And I said, did you need anything? And she was like, no. Why were you thinking about me? And I was like, I think, I mean, like, never experienced that before. So I was a little taken aback. So I was like, well, you're my client, and I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Well, you don't even know me to ask me or to think I would. And so I started to pull back, but I still felt like, where's this coming from? And she came to me literally the next day. She was like, well, I really need to talk to you because you came to me and you just assumed that I needed this, and I don't need anything. And I was like, well, I want you to know that I apologize that you feel that way. But my intention was this. And I assumed that because you're living in a shelter, that you would want these things. And I did. I had to be honest and say, well, I would think you didn't have, because I've been in this situation. Money is tight, but I assumed. And in that situation, I realized, oh, wow, I assumed that this person needed what I thought they needed
Mm,
because of what I needed at
right.
that point in time. And so that assumption is deep because it can go there. Oh my gosh, it can go there. Just by you, did you have her make the cake? Right?
So we just talked about it at that point, and I told her, I said, listen, you made my cake when you have some time, okay?
Yeah, because it's layers to that thing because it's like,
Mm,
well, you took that away from me. You took that not control, but it's just that can't find the word, but
opportunity
that
outlet, yeah.
yes to do this for you. That would meant a lot to me, Rose, but you took that away
Mm,
from me and you had the grocery store make the cake. And you're like, no, I just was thinking about you. Like I just, that assumptions is so layered. It's so layered. Yes.
mm. You're so right. When I love that story that you gave because I experienced that recently. And because of your course, I actually addressed it right in the moment. So my girlfriend was saying, um, I have to do this, I have to do that. My son is doing this, my son is doing that. And she's communicating all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, honey, virtual hugs to you. Because based on the schedule that she laid out, I would have been on the floor sleeping, right? So I said, oh, I'm so, something about like, I'm sorry, or virtual hugs to you, I said to her. And she responded so graciously, but her response was communicating, I'm living my best life. And I said to her, you know what? I'm so glad that you responded that way because I just took a communication course. And had you not told me that, I would have just thought that, you're struggling. But
Mhm.
basically, all these things that's happening, all the things that she has to do for her son, all the things that she has to do for her daughter, all the things that she has to do for work, it's not that she has to do it, it's that she gets to do it. So by her saying, no, 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 I'm enjoying every moment of it. Basically,
Mhm.
she's saying, I prayed for this. I
Mhm.
designed this life. I'm living my dream life. So this schedule, this is what I want. So what you shared is basically, I think you and I were operating on the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But I'm
Mhm.
guessing there's a platinum rule or some kind of titanium rule that says, no, ask the person what they want, ask the person if they need support, ask the person how they feel, because you assuming or you trying to put yourself in their position may not be right because you're different.
Yes, yes. And that's so important. One area that is so important is when people are grieving.
Mm,
I tell people, listen, you're going to go through some phases with grieving. So whatever phase you get to, I'm with you.
mm,
You don't want to talk to me, you're mad, you got an attitude, you don't want to eat, whatever. I'm there because a lot of people back away from people who are grieving, assuming they want a cake, they want you to sit with them and talk. You know what? I don't say nothing. I'm quiet. They might need a moment where they need the laughter. So it's
mm,
like, what do you need at this moment? At this moment, I just need you to walk with me. All right, I'm going to walk with you. We'll walk 30 minutes, end up laughing because we're both sweating. But at that time, his or her need was that particular thing. And I can't assume because someone's going through this or going through that this is what they need. No, what do you need? I'm
yeah.
here, so tell me what you need. That's yeah.
See, that again is another place that I have gotten into assumptions. I remember so two things. One, culturally, in Jamaica, if there's some kind of grief or death or some situation, you give the person space, right? You allow them to grieve, but you give them the blanket. If you need anything, I'm here, right?
Mhm.
I have another friend, she's American of German descent. Her thing is, don't ask the person what they need. Think about what they could potentially need and fill that gap, right? So if you're grieving, maybe you don't feel like cooking. So send them a bunch of food, right? Send them a cleaner to clean their house because they may not feel up to cleaning. So she's that person who will think ahead and fill those gaps. I have a friend who is Nigerian, and when one of her family members passed away, during her reflection, she was like, I'm surprised that such and such didn't come and visit. And I allowed her to speak and vent and share her feelings, but then I offered an alternate perspective, which was maybe culturally they think that you want the space. So maybe they're honoring you by, by not bombarding you with, the need to entertain or the need to communicate or the need to be in someone else's presence when you just want to be in your room crying, right? And she explained to me that for her culture, when someone passes away, you flood the person's house. You
Wow.
make sure that there's always someone there to keep them uplifted, to help them do stuff. So instead of saying, hey, call me if you need something, you are there. So if you see them getting up, what you need some water? Okay, I got you.
Mhm.
Versus, hey, can you bring me some water? Having the person to make that extra effort to ask for what they need.
Mm,
And I'm like,
mm,
this cultural stuff, these layers, these unspoken expectations, there are
mhm.
so many things to it. Another thing is I have my ex, this director, since I don't work there anymore, my old boss, she has the gift of gab. It doesn't matter what you're going through. She knows exactly what to say. And I always loved that about her. Her office was like, you're not feeling okay? Go to her and talk to her. You'll come out feeling good. And I always loved that because when you mentioned the condolences thing, I give that blanket statement of, okay, well, if you need me, I'm here. And then after that experience with my friend who was like, no, this is how we do it culturally. What I do now is I say, hey, I don't know what you're experiencing. I'm here if you need me. If there's anything you want me to do, let me know. But then I'll
Mhm.
also do another thing, which is I'll send them food, I'll send them a card, I'll send them something that I can assume that they would need, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's layered.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. I didn't realize how much can cause people to be offended or feel some type of way. I'm like, dear God, I just was
Yeah,
trying to show the love. But again, I'm showing love according to me.
right,
And some
right.
people only love you the way they know how to love, or,
Absolutely.
so that's the challenge at times. Yeah.
It is a challenge. I remember reading Gary Chapman's Five Love Languages. And what I
Mhm.
realized is even though my love language is quality time, if someone else's love language is not quality time and they're not spending time with me, it doesn't mean that they don't love me. Right.
Mhm.
So it's like I'm over here speaking French, parlez-vous français, and they're like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't do this quality time stuff. Right. Like I
Yeah.
got you a gift. What else do you need? And I'm like, a gift? That's number 5 on my list. That's 1 of 5. But you
Mhm.
really have to not only know the language you speak, but also understand how someone else wants to be spoken to. Right.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's
Oh
another
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, especially with that love language, because mine's is gifts and service. So if you wash the dishes for me, oh man, listen, I'm excited just from washing dishes.
Mhm,
Or if you give me a gift, which I love perfume, I love expensive perfume. So if you buy me a bottle of Prada, oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
mhm,
But not everybody is gifts and service.
mhm.
Someone's is touch, and if someone just comes up to you and touch, whereas from my background, I might jolt a little bit. I might, and somebody's like, well, I was just trying to touch your ear, your shoulder, and everything. And you're just jumping and I'm like, I'm sorry. I had to learn that as well. So I
Mhm.
love that book about the 5 love languages. I love it. I love that book.
It's definitely a two-way street, right? So here I am talking about quality time. So I may be like, hey, Latoya, I'm coming over. I'm coming over. What you doing? And you're like, girl, quality time. That's not how I receive love, right? So I would be forcing my love language on you because I didn't take
Yeah.
the time to communicate to find out what yours
Hmm.
was.
Hmm.
Another interesting thing I found was during the pandemic, my love languages shifted. At one point, I'm like, listen, you can forget this quality time. Go ahead and wash those dishes. And
Hmm.
then we're rocking, right? Because there were so many things happening where I was doing the mom hat, I was doing the homeschooling hat, I was doing the 9 to 5 hat, I was doing the coaching hat. So because the pandemic had put us on lockdown, quality time, I had enough quality time. I see you 24/7. But
Yeah.
that acts of service really came in. That came with the me having to ask for help, me having to admit and acknowledge that I needed support. So it's interesting how sometimes it shifts. I think on the grand scale, mine is quality time and physical touch, but based on what I'm going through, it may shift.
Yeah, and I think I love the book, but I also think flexibility is important
Mm,
for relationships, because, and especially with the pandemic, my husband is the touch, but he's like, listen, I don't feel like touching. I want to sit down, watch the game, and I'm okay with that because I'm more of the gifts and services. So while he's sitting down relaxing, I get a meal for him or whatever, or talk to him, because you got to be able to be flexible.
Yeah.
What if I don't need gifts and services at that time? Maybe I need the touch. Maybe I
Right.
need the handheld. So, flexibility I think is important too in that.
Absolutely. So I think we've talked a lot about the issues, and you were great in weaving in some of the solutions. What else do you think we can do to have more productive conversations? You can speak of this from a personal level, from a professional level, or weave it together, but I want to give you some time to share your genius zone and just bring us
Okay.
into your wheelhouse.
Well, I would definitely say the biggest thing that has helped me with productive conversations is putting myself in the person's shoes, like literally sitting there and taking in, oh wow, how did you feel when that was going on? You know, what happened? And really take in what he or she is saying. And I started to do that a lot more and not be judgmental. I give everyone a blank canvas.
Mm,
I never pull from some other conversation to this. It's always a blank canvas, regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, all of that. I'm looking at this person as a blank soul, and I want to hear what you have to say. And I go into their shoes, and it's so funny because sometimes it leads to somebody crying, and it is like, and I have to like learn, that filter. I gotta filter that back and say, okay, don't start crying, Toya, because you're here in a professional capacity. Um, but it's just really getting into their shoes. What did Rose go through? Where's Rose from? Her background, and like, wow, and really sitting in that. That has been one thing that has helped in my conversations. Also, I would say is empathy.
mhm.
Empathy is so important, Oh, you know what? I'm sorry for you. No, that's not showing empathy. It's in your body language, it's in your facial expressions, it's in your eye contact. They can feel it, and people will open up more in their conversations. Those are two things definitely. Another thing too is watching their tone. I don't get moved by people's tones at all. At all. Some people who are yelling, I'm like, okay, so when you get done yelling, we're going to get to the root of the problem. And it's like, this girl's not moved by it. No, because I know that tone doesn't mean what we think it means. Some
Mm,
people grew up in environments that were just loud. You had the loud auntie, the loud mom, it's just loud. But that doesn't mean that there's not some trouble somewhere. There's not some
mhm.
challenges somewhere that person doesn't know how to talk. So the tone, I'm not moved. I watched it, but I'm not moved by it. What were some other things that I can say? That sensitivity, being
Mhm.
sensitive to certain topics. If I see that someone's like the leg is tapping, if the fingers are moving, I know the subject is real sensitive, and to draw back. And I know when to cut a conversation. You know what? Let's save this for later.
Mhm.
I've learned to be very sensitive to that. I don't like to re-traumatize people. Working with clients from with a human trafficking background. Oh my gosh, I mean, so many stories. It's so sad. It's really sad, but I see how they struggle to trust
Mhm.
people, and sometimes have become manipulative. And so I had to be able to maneuver beyond that with them. Like, okay, I see where you're trying to go, but I'm not here to hurt you or re-traumatize. So I'm very careful in that way too.
So when you talked about empathy, it made me think of the different layers, right? Because empathy is putting yourself in that person's shoes, but at the same time, we can't assume. So then that's when the conversation comes in, like, I hear what you're saying, I'm asking you these questions, and maybe a part of that, excuse me, maybe a part of that question is, how can I help you, right?
Yeah.
Because then going back to what I thought was being considerate, I could be like, well, if I was in that person's shoes, I would want da da da. And then you can have that person with the groceries who's like, what made you think I need help? Right.
Yeah.
So I think with empathy, it's also the communication, and kudos to you on the tone piece, because I don't think I've developed in that piece. I am very sensitive about it. I'm like, why are you shouting? Like, I'm right here. So I
Yeah.
can see that you have a trained ear. Like, I'm going to hear behind the tone. Let me listen to the message. Yes, they're shouting. Yes, they're yelling. That may be an indication of something, or it may not be. It may be, norms,
Yeah.
upbringing.
Yeah. Because I've had experience where someone was yelling just to not talk about the topic.
Mm.
You're upset because you really don't want to talk about the topic.
Yeah.
Or you're upset. I tell, some of my girlfriends laugh, but I say, I don't know why he was yelling at me. I don't know what he did. He left. He went out. I said, because he wanted to go where he really wanted to go.
Mm.
So there's no reason. He started an argument, or she started an argument because of this.
Oh,
She
wow.
really didn't want to be there. And sometimes we don't think about it that way. So
Oh,
then we
wow.
go in our heads and we're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I say? I just was saying hi. And it went to a whole argument. I said, because they didn't want to be there.
Wow.
Why'd you have to say that? I said, listen, I'm going to keep it real with you. Not yelling is speaking, is still speaking. You're saying something. You're communicating something. But behind it is the real meaning and the motive. And I'll just sit there real calm while they're yelling, which probably is like, what is this lady thinking? Yeah.
That disarms them though, because you're not matching them. You're not matching the yelling. You're just like, okay, you let me know when you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me know when you're done.
But you seem to be really good with the calling out though. Like in the story you gave, where the person's kind of manipulate you. Do you verbally call them out and say, I see what you're trying to do. We're not going to do that? Or is it something that you take a mental note of? Like, okay, I see where this is going. Let me redirect.
Yeah, I take a mental note because one thing with me, my heart has gotten me in trouble a lot because of those situations. And, it can play on my heartstrings. And so that has gotten me in trouble. And I was like, oh, but, maybe I shouldn't say that. But I feel like it's like, you got to use wisdom. You see that this person is struggling, like working with, addicts. It's one of the hardest things was had one client who definitely was on meth, methamphetamine, and she's outside with this baby at night with a diaper on. Like, one thing I hate to do is call children and youth. That was one thing I hated to do, regardless of the social economic background, what you're going through. I didn't want to do that because I knew where it went to. And so it was like high as a kite. And I can visually see it. And she's like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, yeah, you are, high as a kite. And it's just like, I got to take a mental note that the focus is this child right now. Let me get this baby. I don't want to do this, but I have to, because at the time I was a mandated reporter working for the shelter. So I was like, I have to, and so that's one situation, and then another situation too is when someone's trying to manipulate me now in the middle of a conversation, I immediately redirect them back to the topic at hand. And I won't even say, so let's get back to, I'll immediately go to where we need to go, because they'll do the tears. Oh my gosh, when the tears fall, and it's not everybody, but when the tears fall, I'm like, okay, Lord, that mental, it's like all these notes are just all in here. Okay, here comes the tears. And then when I would see the shift, when they would cry, real tears, and then in 5 seconds, be back to normal. Tears gone, wiped. I'll say, all right, so we have some mental health issues here, and there's manipulation. So when I see it, I then have to immediately go back into that professional capacity and say, all right, yes, I'm not disregarding, I'm not, showing lack of empathy, but I see there's manipulation here. And then I also see that there's some underlying, diagnosis here. So let's get back to the topic at hand. You need to pay
Oh,
this bill. You need to focus on it.
right.
And people laugh. They're like, you know how to redirect people. I'm like, yeah, because of the experiences where I didn't. And, here's the burnout. Here's the stress because I'm taking on these things to try to assume. I'm assuming they need me to do this, but no, they need to be accountable in handling these things. I'm here to help them, but they have to be accountable.
So that made me think of something. You've had a past experience professionally of
Mhm.
dealing with different types of personalities, different cultures, different backgrounds. And a lot of it, not a lot of it, but some of it may have resulted in manipulation or unpleasant experiences.
Mhm.
How do you guard yourself or prevent yourself from taking that into your personal relationships where you're not always on alert, like, oh, this person's trying to get me because of what you've experienced professionally?
Oh, well, I never bring it home. I never bring it home. I
Wow.
tell people in that field, do not bring it home. And I can tell, one of the clients that I work with now is literally a therapist. And I said, you brought it home with you. She said, yes, I did. I said, you can't. Once
Mm.
you walk out of that door, everything that happened from 9 to 5 is gone. And every day, definitely, I prayed. Some things would really hurt my heart, especially with the human trafficking victims and things like that. And seeing abused babies, that was the hardest thing, to see a baby physically abused because of our passion for children. That was one hard thing that I did take home. But then I had to give it to the Lord and say, you know what, God, this is the reason why I know that affected me, but I can't take this on because it's going to interfere with my job. So I tell people, don't take it on. Remember, it's their life, not yours. It's their life. And
Wow.
we do, we take it on, especially as ladies. I can't say the men don't, but I can speak for us women. We take things on. It's that mother and nurturing
Yeah.
aspect of us, and we want to help and don't take it on. And mentally, I mean, as a client now, she is struggling mentally because she took on the behaviors and the attitudes and the situations of her clients, and you have to leave that at the office.
Mm.
Like, you cannot. You will stress yourself out. You will burn yourself out. You will be on guard. You to the point where it's unhealthy. We're supposed to guard our heart, right? But
Yeah.
don't not operate in post-traumatic stress disorder where
Yeah.
you're on edge about everything.
Mm.
So that has been one thing that has helped is don't take it on. I do a
Wow.
deep breath. I do a deep breath. That was a lot, God,
Yeah.
for
Hmm.
the day, but I'm not taking it on. Yeah.
Wow. That was really practical because what I'm envisioning is you leave your desk, you turn off your computer, you walk into the elevator, you take your deep breath and be like, yo, God, whoa, what a day. Take a deep breath and you literally cast your care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
God, that triggered me. God, that traumatized me. God, that
Mm-hmm.
upset me, but I'm casting my care on you.
Mm-hmm.
Bing, elevator, and you
Yeah.
leave it right there.
Yeah. As soon as I get in the car, as soon as I would get in the car, I
Mm-hmm.
would be in prayer.
Oh,
And,
wow.
before I got in the building, I would be in prayer because I knew it was never going to be a day that it wasn't something crazy going on,
Wow.
because it was just an environment.
That's the nature. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Any final thoughts? I can keep you all day. Any final
Oh
thoughts you want to
no.
share?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing definitely is just acknowledge your challenges, with having a productive conversation. It's okay to say, I really don't know how to do this,
Mm.
and ask for help. And even if you struggle to ask for help, that's a conversation. I struggle to ask for help.
Mm.
And that's one thing that shows, okay, wow, that's a burden lifted. I
Yeah.
actually said that I struggle to ask for help.
Mm.
And then really seek God on who can be in your life to help you. Because one thing I'm gonna say, if I ask you for help and I come to you and say, I'm struggling and need help, and you just sit there, how can I help you? That should be your response. How can I help you then? What do you need me to do? Do you need me to call somebody? Do you need me to, pray with you? What do you need? But to not say anything, to not try to make an attempt to help, now you're completely vulnerable with no assistance. So you're wide open. And that's one thing I would say. One of my favorite quotes though is if they show you who they are, believe them. I love that by Maya Angelou, and that has helped me. This is who they are. As much as I want them to change, I'm not going to get on this soapbox about potential, because I'm not, we'll be on here for a whole nother hour if I get on this tangent. But we see this potential in people. And I always say, it's just my opinion, potential is fleeting. I have the potential to be a pilot. Yes. But I am afraid of heights. And Rose is not going to get on no plane that Latoya is flying because I'm afraid of heights. And that's why I said, be careful of that word potential. Who is that person now?
That's good.
Who's that person now?
So good.
Because that's who you're going to be with. Right. That's who you're going to open a business with. That's who, if that person is not responsible, that person is not getting up on time for the meeting, they show up 30 minutes late, this is who they are. They can change. Oh yes, we all have the potential to change, but it's potential.
Oh, that is so good. And even going back a little further, you gave a real practical nugget. A lot of times we don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We don't have the words. Just ask, what do you need? Right? Because that's simple. What do you need? 4 words. Like, hey, I've never been in this situation before. What do you need? Right? So thank you for sharing that with us. I would be so selfish if I did not share you with everyone else. How can we find you? What do you have going on? What do you want to share? Where are you where's your real estate? Are you on the web? Where are you?
Okay. Yes, we are on, website is www.rhemacreations.com. And I'll spell that. It's RHEMACREATIONZ.com. And me and my husband are a Christian apparel line, but we also work with the community, and especially fighting against homelessness. We work with other churches in the area in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with feeding. Every Tuesday, there's a dinner table, so the community comes out and eats for free. If they need prayer and evangelism, we're a part of that. Also, work with organizations against anti-violence. Many of our youth around the world, especially in America, are being murdered, and it's a really, really sensitive area for all of us, whether we have children or not. So we work with organizations in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We also have a podcast. God has blessed us with Broken Vessels podcast, which is stems from my first published book. So I am an author, and yes, that's my baby. 10 years of writings in this book. It's called Broken Vessels, Letters to Abba. It is a book where I wrote about what happened in the 10 years of my life, talk about the abuse, the divorce, and also I lost everything from Hurricane Lee in one night. So it was, listen, sis, in 10 years, I'm telling you, I went through some stuff, but glory be to God. And once you read it, you'll say, wow, and she's still here. And it's a lot, it's a lot that was poured into that book. So that's available on our website too. And we have YouTube channels. We have 2 of them, Broken Vessels Podcast, and then Rhema Healing, which is our virtual therapy. We work with a counselor who takes her time to talk about overcoming depression, suicide prevention, grief, and forgiveness. So we're going to be doing our part 2 on unforgiveness
Okay.
coming soon. So those are some of the things we're doing. I'm on Facebook, Latoya Washington. I'm on Facebook as well, if anyone wants to reach me there.
Nice. You are such a blessing. Thank you so, so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing all these gems. I feel like you just gave someone a bachelor's degree in communication. So
Right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been my pleasure.